Hello, everyone, and welcome to our latest webinar coming at you live from McLean, Virginia. My name is Aaron Clifford. I'm the Senior Vice President of Marketing for Binary Fountain, and I'm joined with my two colleagues who will introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Andrew Rainey, Executive Vice President of Strategy and Corporate Development at Binary Fountain.
Hi, I'm Chase Osley, VP of Healthcare Product at Binary Fountain.
Thank you guys, and thank you for joining, and thank you all for joining the webinar as well. So today we're tackling the question of return on investment for a reputation management program. So we're going to talk about some of the KPIs that are involved that you may want to keep track of when implementing an ORM solution, and then also what all is involved and what you should be looking at through the life of having an online reputation management program. So with that, let's get to the first question. All right, so our customers and those that we work with, they often ask, how should I frame my thinking around what to invest in ORM? Chase, you want to take it first?
Yeah, so I think it's a number of different things. You have to think through your overall strategy and framework for how you're going to be focusing on ORM and investing in it accordingly. I think there's a couple different places. Digital, obviously, for your online, your website, your digital presence online. How are you managing your reputation in those areas? Separately, in the patient experience, ultimately, what experiences are you delivering to your patients that'll ultimately dictate the type of feedback that you're getting online. And then thirdly, operationally, if you're getting a lot of feedback from patients, some of it's going to be positive, some of it's going to be negative. You need to be able to navigate that feedback effectively, understand how you're operating at scale, and figure out operationally where there's opportunities for improvement. If you're ultimately improving in those areas that are subpar, it's going to be reflected online eventually and the feedback that you're getting, and ultimately, ideally spur additional patients coming into your system as a result of that.
Good. Andrew?
Yeah, and I guess just to add to that, and we'll talk about some of the metrics in a little bit, but I think it's also important to really identify who are the various team leads that are going to be part of the overall initiative or the project that manages online reputation. So having buy-in not only at the and ownership at the health system level, but then also depending on how the organization is structured and obviously the size of the organization, but who are all the business users that would also be benefiting from an ORM program as well. At the end of the day, I think a lot of these initiatives are centered around, when you do a search, what are people likely to find, and how are you able to appropriately manage that overall brand presence and reputation, et cetera. And that really ties to then the metrics that you then want to be tracking moving forward to then track the success of the initiative or the overall program. Also important to identify that it's not just Marcom. I think ORM is typically centered around just that overall team, so that either the chief marketing officer, head of digital, or maybe the director or VP of marketing communications, in some cases PR. But we've also found, depending on the type of ORM program that they're rolling out, you'll see patient experience in some cases. So that actually leads into the overall framework and strategy between a first party and third party reviews and ratings. So I think most think of ratings and reviews in the context of third parties, so that Facebook's, Google's, et cetera. But there's also a massive opportunity to drive feedback to their own website using existing data, and that's often driven through the patient experience team. So identifying all those stakeholders, make sure everyone's on the same page and that you have that buy-in from the beginning is important.
That's great. Good responses. And just I'm going to add a little bit, it's interesting just in terms of digital initiatives or Marcom initiatives that sometimes, and this was my personal experience, where we started off in redesigning websites. We had 300 websites at my previous employer that we were going to redesign. And I quickly got ahead and went, oh my gosh, we had some reputation management issues. And that's kind of what birthed the ORM strategy, my previous company. So there's, interesting on how some of these things originate and where they originate from and who to involve. So great feedback. All right, so our second question, and you mentioned metrics, Andrew, but what are some of the key metrics that organizations should track enterprise-wide? Why should they track them, and what should they track, and why should they track them?
Want me to
you go first.
Sure.
You mentioned metrics.
All right, you went first last time, right?
Yeah.
Some of them are obvious, right? So it's when you do an online search, what are you likely to find? Do you show up in the first place, right? So if I do a search for one of my providers from the health system's perspective, so I'm looking for an orthopedic surgeon near me, or I'm looking for Dr. John Smith, In that overall search ranking, where do I fall in that overall ranking? Am I in the top? Am I number one, or am I that top three? Am I on the first page of Google, et cetera? A lot of that's tied to, and there's a lot of factors that lead into search ranking, obviously, but ratings and reviews is obviously going to be one of those critical factors in addition to maybe in listings information. And search ranking is not just siloed to what you see in that Google search and that Bing search, it's also within maps. So when you do a search within the maps, who's showing up in that overall list as well? Because if you don't show up, you don't exist. So that's incredibly important. You know, you could have 5 stars across the board for each and every one of your providers, your facilities, but if you're not showing up in the search, you don't exist to that consumer. Obviously the ratings, the reviews, what is the average star rating? Look to see the vulnerability of those ratings. So I could be 5 stars or 4.5 stars across the board, but if that's based on maybe 5 or 6 reviews, that means that can be disrupted and impacted rather quickly based on one negative review and one negative experience from a patient that's gone online. Or, you know, when was it posted most recently, right? I think there's a lot of signals that can be taken from other industries to what's guiding that consumer behavior and choice. And then you just apply that to some of the data that you're seeing within the system. You know, what are they going to be using as part of their decision-making process? And those are some of the ones that we see.
Yeah, and I also say coverage is also important. As to Andrew's point, you want to make sure that on the sites that matter, right, where are patients most likely going searching for care? Obviously, Google is a very hot spot, but there's also healthcare specific sites, Health Grades, Vitals, et cetera. You want to make sure that you understand where are the most important sites where patients are going to be going looking for care, and then ensuring that you have coverage on all of those. You want to make sure that you have a star rating for all of your providers, that you have a healthy volume of feedback, and also to Andrew's point, that consistently getting feedback on those sites. So if you are proactively, you know, utilizing programs or technology to drive your patients and getting feedback online, you want to make sure that you're thinking about coverage and ensuring that you're focusing on all the sites that matter and that you are consistently getting feedback on those sites. Ultimately ensuring that any potential candidate or any potential patient that is going to those sites looking for care is finding your providers. And when you think about shopping on Amazon, if a product has a star rating, you have a much higher degree of confidence in it versus a product that has no reviews on it, right? So it's really important you think about, you know, shopping for a provider that patients / consumers have the same mindset, and so coverage is really important.
I think it was also tied to what we were talking about before is, you know, identifying all the various stakeholders, not just within that department, but, you know, patient experience and marketing communications especially. Not losing sight of the fact that these are legitimate patient and consumer reviews that are going online, right? So, you know, we do get those questions, and we see a lot of the health systems when they've launched an ORM program, you know, well, what do we do to remove reviews? It's like, well, that should not be the mindset, right? Those are legitimate, that's legitimate feedback, and a lot of times it can be, you know, it can be beneficial to take a look to see, are there some areas of improvement? Was that a one-off? Was that an anomaly versus is this an underlying theme or an issue that needs to be improved upon? Because the reality is, if you can really understand, and marketing team working with the patient experience team is, if you have an underlying issue at one of your practices or with one of the individual physicians, whether it be bedside manner or finding a parking spot or friendliness of the front desk staff, whatever it may be, if you can improve that, you won't have future negative reviews, right? And if anything, it'll be the opposite. You'll have more positive feedback for patients, for new patients to see as well.
Good. Thank you, guys. That's a great response to that question. All right, so the next question is, how do I connect ORM and revenue when I want to get buy-in for a new strategic initiative or for more budget?
So when it comes to ORM, I think that a critical mass of the market has realized that it's a cost of doing business, right? When it comes to tying revenue directly to your ORM initiatives, I think there's dotted lines and then there's straight lines. As far as ensuring that you have an optimal reputation online, I think it's become table stakes for the market. When it comes to patients searching for care online, the majority of the market is doing that, and they're going online, they're searching for care there, and ensuring that you have an optimal reputation when people are searching for you, that they can find you, to Andrew's point earlier, when they search for your providers, they're searching for care, that you're always surfacing very high in the rankings and that you're ultimately able to be found is critical. And so I think, and also ensuring that what people are saying about you online is optimal as well, and that the care and experiences that you're delivering are positive, are also very impactful factors that are going to matter to patients when they're searching for care. So I think as far as investing in ORM, it's something that everyone has to do. I think the question is, what are your tactics or strategies for where you invest in and where you do not invest in?
Yeah, so I think it's a lot of direct and indirect influential factors. I think it's important for the groups and the organizations, obviously, to also gain buy-in in the sense of what those variables are that have an impact on ORM strategy. I think some of the underlying variables that we see that you want to influence either directly or indirectly is going to be, how do we attract net new patients, right? So when a new patient's doing an online search, I need to find a new primary care, or I need to find a specialist. What am I likely to see? And then ultimately convert by booking an appointment or calling in. But then it's also about loyalties. Is that those existing patients that already had experience, positive or negative, how do you keep them within the system, right? So that way they're not going to go out of network. So there's a lot of different inputs that can obviously contribute towards that, like star ratings, like just general presence to begin with, accessibility and visibility online. So I think if you can get the buy-in for, that these are the variables that you're going to be tracking as success metrics prior to launching the initiative, then there's no surprises. Once you've seen the success, you already have the alignment that's already been baked in.
Very good. Good. All right, let's go to the next question. So how does ORM connect to revenue generation for healthcare? So we've already been talking a little bit in the previous question about the return on investment and what to look at, how do you fund, how do you get more budget? The marketer's challenge always is, how do I prove whatever initiative that you're embarking on, how do you prove that it's actually bringing in revenue? And what's the return, and what's the best tactic to use, and what's the best strategy? So in the online reputation management, listings management, all those items are definitely fall into the category. One thing that I recommend are that systems come up with a model to really frame out what the program is impacting and how much it's impacting. For example, a lot of things that we were talking about earlier is know your KPIs, and these are the KPIs to track. My recommendation is that you get a 6 months before the program that you implement and 6 months after, and that you consistently measure even year over year. And then as the program is launching and it's in sort of maintenance mode, that you're looking at month over month analytics as well and metrics to see how you're performing. So one thing I'd recommend doing is do a 6 months before of your new patient volume. So loyalty is important for folks coming back. You want to track that. But let's just start with new patient revenue 6 months before implementing the program. And then once you implement and you're managing the engagement, you're measuring, are your star ratings going up? Are the number of reviews going up? Is the quality of reviews improving? Then looking at your measurement of the 6 months after and just see if there's a correlation. It's not sometimes a direct correlation to the program, but it's something to track that your management teams and that you can share with others. Something else, obviously they mentioned the ratings and reviews, tracking those before and after your program. There should be a marked improvement as you start engaging and you're managing your reputation appropriately. You'll see an increase. So that's something else to keep in mind. And then what's really important, especially in healthcare, is your service lines and knowing your service line revenue. Sometimes marketers have this information, sometimes they don't, but it's really important. You choose the top 4 service lines that your health system is going after and strategically what they're focusing on for the year, and measure the reputation for those service lines and make sure that you're communicating and reporting out the results. Whether it's good or bad, most of the time if you didn't have anything before, chances are it's going to be way better as far as the reputation and the reviews that you're getting. But it's very important to do that. And again, you may have another ad campaign launching. You may have another initiative in marketing, email or digital marketing that may impact the patient, the new patient volume, but it's definitely my experience working with customers and previous experiences, you'll see a lift in new patient volume for sure. So very important there. And then what's also important, I'll just add it here because we're talking about revenue generation, is at times marketers and health systems are challenged with marketing providers who already have so much capacity that there's nobody else to bring in. So it's really important when embarking on this program, you need to have coverage there to the loyalty factor that Andrew mentioned earlier, but really focus on working with those physicians who have capacity to bring on more patients. Or else you're not going to see the lift in new patient revenue. Obviously, if your providers are already at capacity and there's no way to make a new appointment for those folks. So just another item to keep in mind. All right, let's go to the next question. What are the important areas I need to improve through ORM, and which metrics will have the biggest impact on them? If you all don't have any thoughts on this, I'm happy to do this.
Fire when ready.
Okay. So I think it's really important for marketers to be in tune with the patient satisfaction survey results and the scores. So sometimes marketing and patient experience, they are friends. They're not normally frenemies, but they might be at times. But it's really important for the marketer to understand what are patients saying in the patient satisfaction surveys, right? And correlating that to what they're seeing third-party directories, third-party reviews, I should say. There is so much value in correlation that can happen that will really help fuel change in the health system when you bring those two together. If someone's, for example, speaking about the lab time results, and you're seeing that in patient dissatisfaction, I should say, with lab time results, if you're seeing that in the patient satisfaction survey and the unstructured comments, and then you're seeing that also in third-party reviews, it's probably an issue that you might be able to bring up and raise and get resolved. And that can happen on a number. I just picked lab results, but there are so many other issues in the health system that you might be able to correlate.
It also helps validate the online feedback as well, right? You've taken what was a traditional measure of PX or patient experience with your traditional surveys, but if you can then correlate that to the online feedback, patient experience takes it more seriously. Executive leadership will then take that information more seriously for that next piece that maybe you found just online.
Yeah, agreed. I'd just say it's just going to add weight to your whatever your business case is for making improvement, right? The more data that you have, the more sources that you're getting that feedback from, it's just going to elevate that case and add strength to it. And I think people are going to appreciate if they're getting that feedback from patients, both online versus offline in surveys. It's just going to add weight to the decision and ultimately influence, hopefully, the change that you're looking to drive.
Good feedback, guys. All right, so for our final question, how do I measure the ongoing success of my healthcare company's investment and reputation management?
I can start. I think, a lot of the KPIs that we've already talked through and the tactics for measuring them both before and after, to Aaron's point earlier, I think are some of the key areas. So ultimately, if you don't have a presence on certain social sources, post investment in ORM and really getting serious about this, are you seeing a critical mass of your providers starting to gain traction online with star ratings and with reviews and the timeliness of that? And then for those that already have a presence, are you seeing an improvement in that star rating and the count of reviews over time? And how are you trending? I mean, it's one thing to kick off an initiative and see a lot of success from it initially, but do you have the follow through? Are you remaining consistent, and are you consistently getting engagement online from the patients that you're delivering care to? And are you trending in the right direction? I think this is not a sprint, it's a marathon. And you've got to think about it that way when you're investing in this. It's not about getting it right initially, but following through. And then as you get past kind of the first base, so to speak, of this initiative of making sure that you have a presence online, then it's about getting more strategic on what are the areas that you're actually getting feedback online about. Operationally, where are there areas for you to improve on, and start focusing on, okay, I've got a presence now, but how do I make that even better? How do I take this feedback and ultimately align it with my strategic initiatives and ensure that I'm investing in areas I'm getting feedback on, and ultimately delivering better outcomes and better experiences, which again will help enrich the feedback that you're getting online, and ultimately it's a win-win both in the care that you're delivering, but also in the experiences that are being left online.
Yep. I'd also recommend setting up a regular cadence. The simplest form would be a weekly email, maybe that goes to, and a report that goes to maybe each of the individual practice admins, all the way up to marketing, communications, patient experience, anyone involved with the broader ORM project. More effective programs that we've seen are other groups that share the success stories, right? Mm-hmm. But that happening on a recurring basis or on a scheduled basis. So that could be as simple as, here's this great new online review for this physician or for this facility, right? People want to see that. I think that validates the reasons why people are doing it, or why marketing is doing it on behalf of some of those facilities. People like to focus on the negatives too. So you're also looking at maybe some of those negative reviews that happen, really identifying, was this a one-off? Is this a real thing that we need to think through? Are we seeing this elsewhere? Is this systematic, or is this something that was just centered within a specific a specific facility. I think that's important to look at as well. But just getting in the normal rhythm of the teams at all levels, just getting used to looking at this information, promoting the successes of the program, but then also identifying those potential areas of weakness. Because then it's something that you wouldn't want to then leave without. But once again, holistic, not just surveys, not just the online feedback,
Right.
but looking at that across the continuum of patient experience data.
Great responses. And just to partially summarize that and some of my own thoughts on it is, as you implement and it expands into your organization and throughout the enterprise, really you start having champions internally that are looking forward to the reports and are taking action on the reports that that they're receiving. And so that's obviously the revenue and tying that, because as marketers, you have to prove for every dollar, you got to show some return. At the same time, there's the success of the executives in the organization that are relying on the reports and that are bringing them up and that are making changes because of what they're receiving, the feedback from the patients and the patient's family. Just a real quick item on that. When I talked about patient satisfaction surveys and the results and then correlating those to third party, sometimes the third party has the patient family members. So it's important for the executives of the company to even hear from them, not just the patient themselves. So just inserted that for bonus. But summarizing what they said and then some of my thoughts, definitely executive buy-in and continual executive buy-in really will show the support and will help further the investment in the program and other initiatives that marketing will have. So with that, thank you guys for the chat. Oh, no, you want to go?
Benchmarking would be one last piece, right?
Yes, benchmarking.
Especially competitive benchmarking. I think it puts the scores in perspective, either for if you're analyzing the unstructured, if you're looking at an average star rating at a facility level, at the hospital level, either national benchmarks, but maybe more importantly, even against your local market, right? I think that resonates with executive leadership, irrespective to their overall buy-in to online feedback in the first place, right? Because a lot of the groups that we work with, at least, are hyper competitive to begin with. So, what is our average star rating at the provider level all the way up to the overall system or the hospital level? And, how much ahead are we in terms of we have, 20% more reviews and our average star rating across our providers is 30% higher. Whatever the percentages are, that resonates, right? And that's something that they're going to continue to see.
Definitely, especially from a competitive standpoint.
I think from a additional point, it's just from an ROI measure, right? If you have not or underinvested in ORM traditionally, understanding kind of where you stand initially before you start investing compared to your peers, compared to the market that you're in. A lot of times we've seen clients or organizations do that analysis ahead of time, identify that they are at a disadvantage compared to their competitors. They make the investment and they can measure kind of the catching up or then exceeding their peers in the various areas that they're getting feedback online. So I think it's a great ROI measure as well to understand kind of that investment that you're making or the returns that you're getting, especially from a competitive perspective.
That's a good point. Yeah, you mentioned before, like the 6 months before, 6 months after, or 1 month trailing versus 1 month ahead, not just internally, but then against competitors. Yeah, I like
good.
That.
Really good point. Awesome. Great feedback. Thank you guys for the chat. Thank you all for joining. To learn more about Binary Fountain, what we have, speaking of chat, you can go to our website, binaryfountain.com, and engage us on the chat bot there. But also we have webinars, ebooks, white papers that you can download, case studies that talk a lot about what we talked about today. But thank you for joining us.
Thanks a lot, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Aaron.